Okay. And then let me set up the streaming for you guys. Okay, wonderful. So everything's all set, so you guys can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, I guess we can get started. So the Doctor Who panel is back. We did one back in the first webcon in May, and I felt that was really successful, so I decided to follow up and do another one. So in today's panel, we're specifically going to look at how we can improve the current state of Doctor Who and what our Series 13 would look like. What kind of villains, what kind of companions, supporting characters, storylines, all of that. So we can start with everyone can introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself, and then we'll go through the questions I prepared, and then if there's time left over after that, we can do Q&A from the audience. So we can just go through in the order that I see them on my screen, which would have Nathaniel going first.
Okay. My name is Nathaniel Wayne. I run a number of YouTube channels, but the one I'm most known for in terms of Doctor Who is Council of Geeks. And yeah, I think that'll do for the basics.
Next person, Jay.
Hi, I'm JXE. I make videos about whatever I feel like at the time, and a lot of the time that's Doctor Who because I'm a big fan of the show. I think, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Harbo?
I'm Harbo Walms. I make videos about Doctor Who as well, like reviews and video essay stuff. Some people may know me as that guy that hates the Weeping Angels because that's my most popular video. So yeah, that's about it.
There has to be at least one.
Next we have William.
Hi folks, let me know if I'm coming in clear. Microphone's a bit far away, but thank you, Nathaniel. Yeah, I'm known online as Mr. TARDIS Reviews, and my cat Winnie has decided to join us as well, so I apologise for all of
that. And then Molly next.
Hello, I'm Willie, and I run a podcast called Galactic Yo-Yo, where I talk to people about their unpopular Doctor Who opinions. That's who I am.
Great. So my name is Justin Ashbrook. I moderated the last Doctor Who panel in May. Since then, I've started my YouTube channel where sometimes I talk about Doctor Who, and in addition, I'm an admin for one of the leading Doctor Who Facebook pages called Bad Wolf. So I guess we can get started with the first question. So one thing Chibnall was criticized by some for doing in the last two series were the way he handled companions, having 3 companions with the new Doctor, and some of the just kind of juggling them, trying to juggle them. How would you guys like to see the companion situation change in Series 13, if at all? This could be like have some of them leave, or all of them leave, or maybe bringing in new ones. So we can go in the same order as before.
Okay, so this is a pretty straightforward one for me. I actually want them to do what it looks like they are doing, which is ditching Ryan and Graham and keeping Yaz. I am one of the people who does feel very strongly that 3 companions, it's not that inherently 3 companions is too much. It was too much to bring in with a Doctor we didn't know yet. So we had neither the time to get to know Jodie Whittaker very well, and she didn't have a definitive connection clearly with one companion, because you learn a lot about who the Doctor is through that connection, and she just hasn't built one yet. So given that at this point, it really does feel like Ryan and Graham have had their utility, and they've kind of had arcs, Graham coming to terms with Grace dying and Ryan getting more confidence in himself, plus their own relationship. It really feels like they've come to a comfortable point where it's good for them to leave. And I would really like to just leave Yaz, no new companions on top of that, leave Yaz and have them build up that connection between them so that we can so I can better understand Jodie's doctor through that relationship, because I really have come to the conclusion that so much of what we know about the doctor is how they relate to the companions, and she's been a little bit distant to all three of them so far, more than I would have liked.
Yeah, I'm fairly in a fairly similar boat that I don't want them all to stick around. Now that Jack is clearly back in the picture, I would be very happy with him hopping on board the TARDIS for a long run of adventures, like we haven't really had since series 1 of the new show. I would really enjoy that because I love Jack as a character, and Chibnall's got experience writing him. He did 2 seasons, or was it 3 seasons of Torchwood? I've not seen any of those recently though, and the one I did watch back, Jack was a bit odd in it. What is it? He defends Gwen from someone saying that, from someone calling her like a little girl out of her depth. He says, she doesn't look like any little girl to me. She's got all the right curves in all the right places. And I go, ugh. But that's a bit of a tangent. I'd like to see Jack back, and Chibnall has experienced writing him, so I'd be very happy seeing him board the TARDIS for some actual trips.
Was it me next? Or
Yep.
yeah, okay. I pretty much agree with everything Nathaniel was saying. That we shouldn't have started with 3 straight off the bat. I've always kind of thought we should have started with maybe Ryan as the main, and then halfway through the season you get Graham come in, and then Yaz is sort of the Mickey, Jackie, homebound character. That would have helped it make it a lot more sort of easing it in. Now that we didn't get that, I think, yeah, they should go with the direction of getting rid of Graham and Ryan and having Yaz there's the only companion, maybe, so then we can get more sort of a family dynamic in series 13 as well, because it feels like they kind of tried tiptoeing around that in the first 2 series, but they didn't really do anything with it. There was just like 2 episodes where they kind of touched upon it. And I feel like if they'd given that more of a focus, we'd have more of a connection with their character as a companion. So yeah, I think just Yaz is the way they should move forward.
Yeah, I actually liked how Chibnall started off the run, how it was like 4 leads in this family unit, because I think Chibnall approached companions very differently to how Moffat and Rusty Davis had done, where the companions were so centric to everything and so singular, more or less. So when you had Amy and Rory, their marriage was a big factor into it as well. So that having this sort of 4 leads family unit thing was a really interesting approach to take. But then in Resolution, when Ryan and Graham kind of came to the end of their respective arcs, but then they stayed on board, I think it kind of showed that they had very little to do. Like, I know that Jay pointed this out on Twitter as well, but when the Doctor Who Instagram account posted that basketball thing from Spyfall and then Timeless Children, it's like it seems like Ryan's only purpose in Series 12 was to throw a basketball and a bomb, and that's not really adequate characterization. I know like Tosin Cole and Bradley Walsh have been really good in the series, in my opinion, but yeah, I think just having maybe the Doctor and Yaz in Series 13, and then maybe bring on Jack, kind of akin to like Series 1, when he joins in 3/4 of the way through, I think that would be the best approach to take for companions.
Yeah, I kind of agree with, boringly, I kind of agree with everybody's thoughts so far. I think it's time for Graham and Ryan to go. I think Graham and Ryan, like you say, everyone said they've had their arcs. And, you know, in Series 11, we definitely didn't get enough of Yaz. And we got a little bit more insight into her character in Series 12. But to me, it's still not enough. And I don't know, it really feels like she and the Doctor have this friendship that we could do so much more to tap into in Series 13. I really want to see that dynamic of one of you said something about we learn more about a Doctor from their interactions and relationships with the companion. And I think, yeah, it still doesn't feel like it's. I mean, I remember having a realization halfway through series 12 that we were at halfway through series 6. If it had been Amy and Rory, if you get my gist, it jarred for me that, wow, we've had that same amount of time, and yet it really felt like we knew Amy and Rory halfway through series 6, whereas halfway through series 12, Graham, Ryan, and Yaz all still felt like new characters to me. And I think part of it's overcrowding, but part of it was just some kind of weird refusal to explore those relationships. So I'm looking forward to getting more Yaz, and I think the way to get more Yaz is to boot Graham and Ryan out. I think definitely.
Yeah, so it seems like pretty much all of us are kind of on the same page with this. I think the only time that I can think of that there were three companions with the new Doctor was like the earliest season 1 in 1963, and that was kind of like, and I think they were handled differently. I think they were characterized better than how they are.
Peter Davison had 3 companions for a little while, and it didn't work well then either.
Yeah.
Sarah Jane is probably the best example of someone who's had 3 companions and it's worked great.
But I think
it's so true. That's a really good point. Yeah, that is so true.
But with something like that, because I'm assuming you're referencing the Sarah Jane Adventures, people knew who Sarah Jane was coming in, and so they only had to learn these other 3 characters. And actually, to go back to the beginning of the show in 63, it was okay that they had 4, because at that point, the Doctor we knew almost nothing about. He was deliberately mysterious at that point, and he wasn't even they weren't even sure he was going to necessarily be the focus of the show when they started. But when you introduce 3 companions at the same time as a Doctor we don't know yet.
Plus, back then in the first in the first run of the show, the episodes were so much longer. They had so much more time to actually show you who these people were.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those characters, like, they would conflict with each other. They'd disagree and butt heads occasionally. Whereas I think the TARDIS fam, as it currently stands, what do they disagree on?
Yeah,
like,
there's
where
no,
did
no
conflict?
conflict.
Zero.
Yeah,
It's,
like the good positive vibes is it has its like moments, and it has its place, but I don't know what any of the companions would be like separated from the Doctor, and I think that in and of itself is an issue.
The good vibes, that it feels like without that conflict, the good vibes mean less, because if they clashed, then it would mean more when they don't clash, if that makes any sense. Because then it would feel like, oh, right, this is something actually good, and not just, oh, it's just the usual.
I hadn't thought of that. That is a good point. And actually, what it made me think of is a show that I think I like a lot more than a lot of people, but I really like Legends of Tomorrow. And one of the things I really like about that show is this team very obviously care about each other, but they are constantly butting heads because they all have different approaches on things. But they also all care about each other and they all matter, but they agree on almost nothing, like ever.
Yeah, because you look back at series 1 of New Who, and the Doctor and Rose constantly argued and stuff. In almost every episode, there was something they had a conflict about. And then there was Mickey as well, who was a character that always conflicted with the Doctor. So did Jackie. So that meant that at the end of the series, where they sort of all decided, okay, we're going to help Rose get back to the Doctor, it meant something. So it's like, these are 2 characters that the Doctor has done nothing good for almost. He's ruined their lives, and yet they're deciding, okay, let's help Rose get back to the Doctor. So it felt like a big moment because they had that conflict. And so, yeah, if you have the conflict, it makes the resolutions of happiness, I guess, feel better.
And the conflict only makes sense in episodes where you are dealing with more complex moral situations, even when they're not that complex. When you're dealing with life and death situations that most people don't have to deal with in their lives, or at least not, very often. When you're dealing with that on a week-to-week basis, of course, there's going to be disagreements coming up there. That's only natural, and you're going to learn a lot about people through how they want to handle situations and what it is that they will speak up about when they think the Doctor is mishandling a situation.
You could see attempts in series 12 to inject a little bit more conflict. I think that the Doctor being kind of moody with the companions, and some of the stuff about, you know, the Doctor's angst about Gallifrey being destroyed again. But it just never really rang true for me, because it was very the Doctor and the companions, and the power imbalance didn't work, and it didn't hit the right marks for me.
Another thing about like her being moody about Gallifrey and stuff is they kind of forgot about it in some episodes, and then suddenly went back to it as if it just happened, and it sort of felt like disjointed, because they were kind of like, oh, well, this is a story that's important for the wider series, so now let's revisit that, which kind of just felt a bit off.
That's symptomatic of Chibnall's approach to characterization in general. You find that, you know, you've got the bulk of a story, then you've got, okay, let's sit and have a 5-minute scene where we talk about our feelings right now, which I find ineffective.
And it was exactly that with Gallifrey being destroyed again, where they had the Doctor would be fine in her usual self for the whole episode, and then maybe for 3 minutes at the end of the episode, she would remind you that she's grumpy by going and staring at Gallifrey at the TARDIS, which isn't really. It's like it's almost a separate character where she will go away and just remind you that she's got this thing going on that doesn't affect her life at all, because you've just seen her living her life normally. Or it doesn't affect her day to day, rather.
And like the moments of conflict are like so short and like so detached from everything else. Like when is it the end of it takes you away, when Ryan and Yaz are saying like, how long like do you think we'll travel? And then that but that's the scene. That's all that happens in it. They don't actually expand or properly delve on it. So the fact that they don't elaborate on it makes it more obvious that it's kind of lacking in that respect, because they give it like a cursory notice and then just ignore the rest, and then just ignore it afterwards.
Yeah, so I guess we can go ahead with the second question. What villains would you guys like to see in Series 13? They could be villains that we saw recently, ones we haven't seen for a long time, or even if it's not like a specific like person, like what type of villain would you want to see?
Why don't we do this in the reverse order this time? I feel bad having Molly at the end every time.
All right, that's fine.
I'm not sure I have a real opinion on this, actually. I very much feel like, for me, villains in Doctor Who are always best when they serve the story, rather than thinking, okay, here's the villain, let's build a story around it. You know, the best villains in Doctor Who, you know, are built into the story itself. So I find it kind of hard to answer that. Villains like the Weeping Angels really work as part of a story like Blink, because they're built into that story's DNA. You know, famously, the Sontarans have never really worked since the Time Warrior, because they were built as part of that story. So I find that kind of hard to answer. It would be nice to see. I don't know. No, I don't. Yeah, it's not something I have an opinion on.
I've said before that I think that Chibnall's villains are one of the best things about his run. Like, I love the characterization of the Daleks, Ashad, the Cyberman, and like the Master. I think like Sacha Dhawan's been such a bright spot in this era so far. So I've got a feeling that if you were to like bring back maybe a classic villain, he'd probably do a really good job with it. It's like I think if the Sea Devils, for example, were to come back, like a story like Praxius would have been the one where they did it. But they didn't, which is absolutely fair enough. So yeah, but from what Molly was saying, like sometimes you can have villains which perfectly are suited to the story that they're in. But you've also got stories like, I've recently watched The Macra Terror, which is like a George Orwell 1984 type parallel. But surprise, the villains are giant crabs. Like those are very different concepts, but yeah, it still works. So I think because Doctor Who is so weird and wonderful and strange, you can have that weird mix match if you wanted to, and it still works.
I sort of meant I what I don't want is picking a villain and trying to build a story around it. Like,
oh yeah,
story like, sorry to interrupt.
That's fine.
The order, but I was watching a story like the Sontaran stratagem the other day. And I think that's prime example of, okay, we need to write a Sontaran story. And actually, there aren't really any ideas there. None of it really adds up. Like the Satnav stuff doesn't really mesh with the Sontarans as a concept. So I think that is the wrong approach to go. Okay, let's pick a villain that's celebrated from the past and build a story around that. I think that's not often conducive to good storytelling.
Yeah, well, like, even in the Sontaran stratagem, they even point out like the poison gas, and this is not a Sontaran strategy. This is not what you do. So in a way, that was a good bit of lampshade hanging. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't really have a specific preference for what type of villain could return. But I do like what Jibble's been doing with villains so far. I do like it. I think he's very good at writing for Doctor Who villains in the stories that he's done so far. I personally don't have many problems with what he's done with the run.
In terms of villains, yeah, I don't really know like, any specific ones. I mean, in general, sort of I've always kind of wanted to see the Sycorax back, but I don't really know how they could do that. Well, I mean, they could do something, and obviously Chibnall might be able to do this because he wrote the Silurian two-parter Series 5, which even though I don't like it, they could do something similar with Series 5, just on like a mining asteroid or something. Maybe it turns out the Sycorax own that asteroid or something like that. So I feel like Sycorax have got loads of potential to come back. But I do think we kind of need some resolutions to what happens to the villains in Series 11 and 12, because there's been quite a few that have just left. Like Daniel Barton just walked out and that was it. You know, I kind of like what was going on with his whole DNA thing, you know, what's happening with that. And yeah, there's just been a bunch of villains in the Chibnall era that just kind of vanished from the story, even though it feels like they're being positioned to come back. So I ideally would get some returns of those to actually see that, so then we know that they weren't just forgotten in the story. They were supposed to come back at a later point.
I do kind of feel like Chibs is working his way up to a villain team-up event for a finale.
Possibly. I mean, it could be like that. It would maybe work, but I don't think any of the villains that would team up really feel like big enough to work in the team dynamic, or as like the big villain. But that's just my opinion, really.
Well, I kind of, because Chibnall hasn't really sold me on any of his villains so far. The Master that everyone loves seems to be the fan favorite for Chibnall villains. I forget the actor's name, Sasha something. He doesn't resonate with me like he does with other people. I see him more as just, he does manic laughs, and
he's sort of a caricature of John Sims Master in a way. Kind of
kind
of like what someone would think the John Sim Master is, and then just that.
It's like it's the craziest bits of his master, and that's his character. In terms of returning villains, though, I've got a deck here of Battles in Time. I thought I'd just pick one out at random, and see, and just think, what would it be like if a group of sleeping tetraps was? What is a tetrap? Hang on, that's like the thing from Time and the Rani, isn't it? With the 3 eye. Yeah, this one. There we go. That's our returning villain for season 13. The tetraps. I've not seen that story, so bring it on.
Yeah, everyone says bring back the Rani, but no, actually, what we should do is bring back the tetrap.
Never bring back the Rani.
So, all in favor of Jay's approach for the next showrunner, say aye.
Yeah, go for it. I don't know.
Okay, so clearly I'm going to out myself as the big nerd here, because I have a very specific thing that if I were in charge of the show that I would be doing and I would be bringing back. I would bring back the Dream Lord, and I would use him. In my mind, I would want Toby Jones to play the part again. I would like to see him modify the part to adjust for the fact that he's playing off a new Doctor now. If they wanted to recast, because theoretically a regeneration might reset what the Dream Lord looks like, I could go either way on that. But I'm gonna say he, on the presumption it would still be Toby Jones. The reason I want him back, aside from the fact that he should come back because he's amazing and awesome and wonderful, is that I am on record in many places as really not liking the Timeless Child thing. That having been said, it's out there now, and while I don't want future showrunners, I would prefer they ignore it. I expect Chibnall to do something with it. And what I would want is I would want the trauma of finding that out to basically be the ignition that kicks the Dream Lord back in. Because before it had to be like that little psychic spore thing. This time I'd like to have that come back basically as a manifestation of the Doctor's trauma. And it can even start out as something that only she sees, but is taunting her and mocking her and needling her and finding a way to dig at everything that is going on in her head, which we have seen so little of across this. I think that that would be a way to not only have him show up intermittently and not necessarily have to be the driving force behind every story, and have a way to really dig into her and how this is affecting her without having to have her exposit how she feels to the companions or to the master or to someone like that, just to have someone very forcibly and painfully pull out the pain that she is dealing with trying to process everything. And ultimately, at some point, have that manifest with him becoming semi-corporeal, kind of like he was in Amy's Choice, so that there is some impact on the companions and it's not all in her head. But that is who I would bring back, and that's what I would do with him.
I really like that suggestion because it works with my philosophy of bringing villains back when the story suits it. You've got a story there for that villain to return in. I think that justifies the desire for the villain to return, if you get my meaning.
But surely another Dreamlord story would be kind of similar to Can You Hear Me, which obviously we just had. So like, because yeah, we just had a story about nightmares and dreams and stuff. So another one so soon, even if it was with a different villain or a different sort of core to it, it would kind of feel a bit.
I would argue that wasn't targeted at the Doctor, though. That was dealing with dreams and nightmares of basically everyone other than the Doctor. And I do think the impact would be different enough to drill into her head specifically, as opposed to, just talking about the human condition in general, which was more what Can You Hear Me was doing.
I really forgot about Zelen as well. He was great. He should bring back Zelen. He's one of like the best performances of the season, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a stab at this really quickly, and just using Molly's framework. I really like sympathetic villains, like ones that you like. They're trying to do the right thing, but they're doing bad things to achieve it. So the example that I think of with Doctor Who with that is the meddling monk, because he's like trying to advance history, but like he's doing it in a way that like puts could damage time, like history and stuff. And giving him like a redemption arc, I think would be really cool, just to have he's have the Doctor like convince him what he's doing is wrong, and kind of just like have him correct what he's doing.
I think you could build a really good anti-colonialist story around the meddling monk and his desire to kind of advance history, and you could frame it in that light, maybe, I don't know, in the modern context.
See, it's funny. I've never been opposed to the idea, but I've always been a little bit soft on the idea of the meddling monk coming back until I listened to Missy Series 1 from Big Finish recently, which had the meddling monk appear in a story, and it was brilliant and amazing. I'm like, okay, yes, I now definitely want this character to come back into the show. I'm not sure I go so far as to do a redemption with him, but you could definitely do cases where what he's doing or what he wants to do actually aligns with what the Doctor's trying to do in once in a while. I think trying to do a redemption with anyone who is feasibly a recurring character, that always worries me, because once they're redeemed, that's usually their arc complete, which means either you kill them, they never show up again, they become unrecognizable as who they were before, or you undo the redemption, in which case, what was the point? So I'm always kind of cautious about redemption stories for anyone who is theoretically going to stick around once that arc's done.
But even if you like set it like before the redemption arc, like a previous regeneration or something, like you could still bring them back that way as the.
There's precedent for that now.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we can go ahead with the next question, which is how would you like to see the Doctor's characterization and personality change from what it was previously, or was it written well already? And anyone can jump in. We don't have to do like a specific order anymore.
I just want to understand her better. Like I said before, that like I don't think she's been badly written. I just think we haven't gotten a lot of insight into her. And when I say that, I don't mean like I want full backstory. Like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. But to come back to what I said at the very start of this thing, you learn so much about Christopher Eccleston through how he related to Rose. You learn so much about Tennant through how he related to all three of his companions. And you learn so much about Matt Smith with Clara. You learned a lot about Capaldi, both with Clara and with Bill. And I feel like I've learned nothing particularly significant.
I agree. You don't really know what 13's convictions or like morals really are, because it just sort of seems like you don't really know what she stands for like properly in the same way as the other ones. Yeah. Like the other ones, you clearly know, okay, this is what they'd do in a situation, but for 13, still have no idea what she would do.
It's why I can't say I don't know if I actually need the writing changed. I do need her characterization clarified, though.
She sort of does a random grab bag of moral actions. People think of her, a lot of people seem to think of her as like the lightest, the kindest of the Doctors, because she is so like happy-go-lucky and sort of bubbly most of the time. But then there's the episode where she throws the masters to the Nazis and
or locks all the spiders into a airtight room to let them
while refusing to shoot them because that would be wrong.
Or just lets that dude blow up Gallifrey and she just runs away.
No, exactly.
Children.
Exactly. I'd like them to sort of to explore that and kind of address it. It feels like it feels like they could address it, but it would feel retroactive, because I don't think they intended this to be like an ongoing theme of her character. I think it's just they overlooked it, but they could turn it into okay, now we're going to address it and sort of explore it.
Yeah.
If I were to give the benefit of the doubt, I'm willing to believe that there is a coherence to how different these reactions are, but whatever it is, I don't know it yet. Like that's, if I'm being generous, I'll say there is characterization and character mechanisms that explains why she does these things, but we haven't been let in on them yet. If I'm not going to be generous, I would just be saying the writing's inconsistent as hell. So depending on my mood, you'll get a different answer.
Yeah, there's something to be said for a lead character who doesn't have all the answers, who sometimes doesn't say the right thing. And especially, I think, in like genre TV shows or genre films with like female leads, they're either like the perfect like Mary Sue, for lack of a better term, or they are like male-coded badass Ripley, Sarah Connor people. So I think there is merit to that sort of approach, but we don't know if that dubious morality is a bug or a feature in the 13th Doctor. I think because we don't have that clarity, we're kind of we don't know what to work with here.
I would be tempted to say it's a bug, because I think politically in general the Chibnall era it seems to be slipping up in a way it's not intending. You know, it's got its diversity quota bang on, but then the actual meat and veg behind it is not there politically. I think for me, in terms of the Doctor's characterization, it's threefold. I think exactly what you were saying, Nathaniel, about I want to see more of her relationships with the companions, and that will get me to learn about what she's like. I think secondly, they need to be writing the jokes better for her, because at the moment it feels like all the jokes are written for Tennant and Smith. They're very quick, they're very fleeting, and actually that's not what Jodie's like as an actor. She's much more she does comedy much more broadly. I feel like they should draw on that a little bit more. And also I feel like they should make her the star of her own show a little bit more, in a way that truly centers her. There was clearly an attempt to do that a little bit with her arc in series 12, but it ended up it concluded with the Master telling her own story for an hour while she stood and said nothing, which to me is regressive as hell. I think, to be honest, for our first female Doctor, she's been disappointingly ineffective, and the fact that you've got the writing team felt the need to have these three companions to support her, and the fact that one of them is an older white man who seems to get all of the moments of comedy and all of the moments of wisdom that would have previously gone to the Doctor. It feels like almost that they're giving a white man these moments, and it's like a loophole for them, which might be a cynical way of looking at it, but for me, it's disappointing.
It was like in Demons of the Punjab and in Praxius, when Graham gets the nice sit-down moments with the supporting character. Though
That should be Jodie.
Yeah,
It should
exactly.
be
Yeah,
Jodie.
exactly that. Especially in, I think, Demons of the Punjab as well.
Like especially for what I understand her characterization, because I'm in the middle of a rewatch and I'm working on Capaldi's era now, and you know there's a validity to some doctors wouldn't sit down and connect, like Capaldi wouldn't have. Certainly not early into his run, because he was barely connecting with Clara when he first started. But that was I could tell that was a deliberate characterization choice for that doctor. Whereas between the fact that she's not the one connecting with these people, yet also she's like all into the fam and you know talking up that end of it. I'm like, again, it's a disconnect that I can come up with reasons for. I just wish the show would give me a reason.
This is why I wanted to bring back Jack as well, is for the Doctor's characterization, because I feel like Jack knows two Doctors well. I feel like meeting 13 and seeing her sort of flounder in moral situations and act very strangely in them, and not support people in the same way that previous incarnations would have. He's the kind of person who can just be there and go, "Are you all right? Is there something up?" And then we can further the Doctor's characterization through that. We can give her an arc where she's confronted by someone who actually knows that she's behaving really differently now, and we can actually examine that change through those events.
Yeah, it would sort of be like the companion holdover we had with Rose and Tennant, and well, I mean, less of an extent with that one, but mainly Capaldi and Clara, where you get this character but then the Doctor who you don't really know anymore, and the character is being the audience surrogate, exploring why the Doctor has changed this way.
Yeah, I said for a while that in an ideal world, like I would have had Pearl Mackie stay on as Bill for series 11, and you could have had, I mean, that would have been such an extraordinary dynamic, because you could have had Bill, who knew the Capaldi Doctor, meeting this brand new Whittaker Doctor, and you know, getting to know all the things that were different about the character now, but also it's a strange one for Bill, who clearly had a relationship with the Doctor in it and a love for the Doctor, and now it has all kinds of implications. I would have loved to have seen that, but alas, it did not happen.
Yes, it's one of the problems with the changeover of showrunner, because when Davies handed over to Moffat, it was a clean slate, and when Moffat handed over to Chibnall, it was a clean slate. We were lucky with the 11th Hour that it was such a strong episode that immediately sold us on Evan, but then we haven't effective crossover yet to sort of hand it over and build on the slate, rather than just awkwardly stepping around it and trying to build it back up.
Yeah, and even if it's not Captain Jack, it could be someone like River Song, who I don't think is exclusively tied to the Moffat or Rusty Davis era, so it could always bring her back if you wanted to have that dynamic, but not with Captain Jack.
They're cowards. They won't do it. They won't do it with River.
They shouldn't bring back River.
Well, no, they can't bring back River. She was concluded so well, and in that conclusion, which we know that she died right after, said that she didn't know that there were any more Doctors than just up to 11. You can't do it. It doesn't fit.
Wibbly wobbly, timeline's broken.
Yeah,
it's one of those characters
can't
that
screw with established continuity and lore. No, absolutely not.
Don't screw with it
never
more.
do that.
It's just one of those characters that where I feel like their story has been told, they're done, it was good, and continuing that, it would just kind of diminish what was already in the past.
I do actually agree, but I do think Jack would be very good for doing what folks have mentioned. And it's funny working my way rewatching Series 8. I'm appreciating Clara more. I still think she was terrible in the second half of Series 7, but I'm appreciating her more for what that dynamic teaches you about Capaldi, and I think having somebody who knows her would be a big help. But yeah, it is the open question of, they have been so harshly segmenting off each each creator's era. I mean, like you say, River Song was in both. She was technically, but she was written by Moffat when she was introduced in the Davies era. So I consider her very firmly to be a Moffat character. And there really has been so little bleed over from one era to the other that I feel, and I don't know why. I don't know if that's a mandate or if that's showrunner ego.
I think it's more of just wanting your own take on it, just to say this is mine, and sort of separating yourself from your predecessor. So
that said, you know,
which I get, but it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater at that point.
And that said, like, Chibnall seems to be doing all he can to emulate the Davies era and draw on the nostalgia of the Davies era, especially in Series 12, even with bringing back Captain Jack, bringing back the Jadoon, you know, his do-over of the Time War. It's like, it's trying to tap into that Davies nostalgia. So yeah, I don't see why they couldn't just go back and bring back some of those characters. Or
it's like in The Day of the Doctor. Even though Moffat brought back a previous showrunner's Doctor in the 10th Doctor, he made sure specifically to give him the last words that Rusty Davis wrote for him. I don't want to go, because at first I just thought it was a bit of a joke, but when they did that watch along a few months back, and he was doing trivia on Twitter, he said that he did that so that he didn't change David Tennant's last words on screen. So even those small details do matter to certain showrunners. So I think it just kind of shows how, Moffat wanted to keep the showrunners' legacies as they were, as much as he possibly could.
I love this bit of the call, this waiting bit.
It's the best part.
I'm all about it.
Yeah, so the next question we can talk about is what kind of themes and subject material would you guys like to see Series 13 take on?
I'm not sure that I want to see it take on to it, but I am going to be very frustrated if it takes on basically anything other than processing through grief and trauma. Because if you're going to do what the Timeless Children did and not, then deal with the personal character consequences, not the lore consequences of that, then why the heck did you do it? So it's not necessarily like in a vacuum the theme that I would pick, but I feel like that's what it has to deal with, because otherwise you've done something massive and had no direct character fallout for it, and then I'm really going to be even more annoyed with the Timeless Children than I already am.
In a similar vein, I'd like that just kind of for any episode, even like, because something I think is missing from the current era is like post-action. Because with Davies and Moffat, you know, most episodes, there was a bit at the end of the episode, like a solid maybe 5 minutes after the day had been saved and everything, of just seeing how it affected our companions and the Doctor. And it doesn't feel like we've had anything really like that yet. It kind of feels like it ends and then it just ends. So I'd like to see themes being explored in that 5 odd minutes to see how it's been affecting, like how the episode has affected the characters. Because a good example is the end of The Runaway Bride. You know, they just, like, the Doctor and Donna just talk for, what was it, like 3 minutes maybe, and they just have a conversation about essentially what the Doctor will do next and what Donna will do next. It's a good way to sort of build upon the episode and what happened, which I feel like we need more moments like that.
I hadn't even thought of that, but that's a really good point. And like, again, it's because of where I am in my rewatch, but I recently rewatched a very bad episode that did that very well, which was Kill the Moon.
That's a good episode.
It's not, but the thing is, and I feel like this doesn't get talked about afterwards, after it's been resolved, there is an argument between Clara and the Doctor in the TARDIS, and it is a brilliant scene. It is emotionally
one of the best scenes, in Doctor Who ever, I think. It's
terrific. I still don't like the episode, but that scene is terrific because it's unpacking what they've just been through. And you're right. Whittaker's era, they haven't done that. They just, the adventure's over. Oh, cool. Well, we'll see you next week. They never stop to process. They never unpack what they've been through.
My main want for I don't know if this is a theme or an idea, but I just want more Jo Martin next year. I think if they don't bring her back as the Doctor on some kind of semi-permanent basis, it's criminal. You know, she was extraordinary. The fans love her.
I just want her to end up being the 14th Doctor.
Yeah,
That's
same.
just me.
That's my main hope. I don't think that will happen, but I think it should happen.
I mean, if it does happen, it would be a nice subversion of the multi-doctor thing when you look back at Fugitive of the Jinx. So we've never seen it from the other way round, where we've seen the current, like the previous Doctor as the main one and the future one as this random character. We've always seen it as the future one revisiting the past ones. So I feel like if they do make her the 14th one, that'll be a good way to sort of change the tradition, I guess.
Just in terms of theme and content for the next season, there's only one real wish that I have for it, and that's that they don't do the thing where they spend an episode taking a part of an issue that has a very clear, correct answer and making the whole episode about proving that answer that the audience already knows. Like, did you know the civil rights movement was a good thing, or that climate change is bad? That's the one thing I just want to ban for next season.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that, you know, the amount of Doctor Who fans, you know, I'm afraid to say that I saw on Twitter around the area of Rosa saying they did not know who Rosa Parks was until that episode aired was shocking, but also went to show why that episode needed to happen. I don't necessarily love every element of that episode, but I think it was...
I'm really torn on that suggestion, because most of my favorite episodes of the last two series have been ones that deal very openly with those sorts of things. Like I actually have a lot of problems with Rosa, but I recognize the positive impact that it had. You know, I love Can You Hear Me and how it's examinations of depression. Demons of the Punjab, another good example. But then at the same time, some of the really clunky ones have been the same thing, just done poorly. Things like Praxeus or Orphan 55. So I'm kind of torn on that, because I feel like they've got a very uneven batting average on how well those pan out.
I want to see more like historical stories, not necessarily the like more obvious morality ones, but I just really like how they've portrayed characters like Nikola Tesla, like Mary Shelley, like Rosa Parks. I'm disappointed that Spyfall brought in Ada Lovelace and Noreen Yat Khan and just had them wander around Paris off screen for 5 minutes to find a house, and that was their role in the story. And it's like, great, now I don't think we can now see those two historical figures in the program again. I want to see them actually have dedicated episodes, because I think those have been consistently the strongest Chibnall led episodes, because I think his creative team clearly have a good passion for history, and normally historical stories are not my favorite of their respective runs. I'm quite adverse to them, but they have been my favorite in the past 2 years. So I want to see more of those, but more just based on the historical figures themselves. I don't want them being background details like in Spyfall.
Totally agree, Will.
Yay.
Yeah, so I guess we can move on. This last question is kind of like a fun question. So if you were so I know the 60th anniversary special is coming up, but do you think there should be like more multi-doctoral episodes than there are currently? And if so, like which doctor or doctors would you guys want to see in that?
I feel like there should, like for the 60th, there should be a multi-doctor one, but kind of a more low-key one than the previous two. Like, is it two? Yeah, that we've had in New Who, because those were like really big sort of things. I'd like something more like Twice Upon a Time than Day of the Doctor for the 60th. Kind of just a story that involves just two doctors. They're just characters in the story. It's not about the multi-doctor thing. They just happen to be there. Kind of, I know it's not a great story, but something like the two doctors in Classic Who, where, you know, it's a normal story in a normal series. It's not like a special. It's just a normal episode that happens to be two doctors.
I'm not sure if I'd want to go that low key, but I don't really have a have a story idea, and the only reason I'm hesitant is because the episode that comes most prominently to the forefront of my head, saying like just a normal story that happens to have multiple doctors, is the Two Doctors, which is pain incarnate. So maybe I'm just traumatized. But who I want them to bring back is Sylvester McCoy's Seventh Doctor and Ace. That is who I want to see come back. Both actors are still with us. And I think much more than any other Doctor of the classic era, McCoy had him and Troughton, because Troughton and Jamie, but like Troughton and Jamie and McCoy and Ace, that was a case of definitive, this is the companion for them. Like they had some others, but this is the one. Because you can look back at someone like, Tom Baker, and you're like, well, maybe the definitive was Romana, maybe it was Sarah J. Like there's debates to be had. There's no debate for McCoy that it's Ace. And they're both still around, and they're both still involved in Doctor Who fandom. Sophie already wrote a friggin' book, which is on my to listen list on Audible. But like they're both still really involved in this. And I don't care how you justify how old the Seventh Doctor now looks because he's not supposed to age. I don't care. Find a stupid tossed off line to explain that and bring them back.
Completely agree. Best Doctor Companion pairing to bring back as well, because I think they're very underappreciated. And I also think they play off Jodie really well because they're such different Doctors to an insane degree. You've got the McCoy already in most of his stories will know everything that's going on before he arrives and will have 5 plans to deal with the situation. And Jodie wanders into a situation and still figures it out at the end of the story what's just happened. I want to see those two interact.
I think as much as I love all of this stuff, I think I don't. I mean, maybe in the 60th anniversary, a multi-Doctor story would be great, but I think before that, definitely not. I think Jodie is being infringed upon enough by other Doctors in the out of universe in the paratext. I don't think she needs another Doctor infringing on her actual stories. We've got something like the Time Lord Victoria's multi-platform event that's happening, which the current incarnation of the Doctor is not involved in at all, and it feels like the brand is kind of not over Tennant, and I think it would be dangerous to. I think Tennant would be the most likely choice for the show the current production team to bring back, and I think as much as like that would be lovely in a vacuum, I think it sends all the wrong messages. I think it makes the show seem like a legacy show, and I think it's a bad idea. Tennant already looms over the current era anyway because of.
I think that's part of why I want. I think that's part of the reason I want to go with someone like Seven and Ace, because no one would ever come away thinking that, well, they should just take over the show, and like that's from so long ago that I don't think you get the I wish they were still in the role thing.
Kind of contrary to that almost, but just because I have to say it, I think Paul McGann needs to come back at some point.
I agree.
He just needs more TV time. When you think about it, he's had a movie and like a 10-minute mini-sode, and that's it for TV. He just needs something else.
7 minutes, but it's a brilliant 7 minutes.
Yeah, true, but he just needs more time.
Bring me knitting.
I think they should just have for a multi-Doctor story, for McGann returning, I think what they would want to do is something quite different where they don't have the Doctors interact, but they say have Jodie remembering something that she did in her 8th incarnation because it's relevant to what's happening to her now, and we see we see in flashbacks what happened to her then, so that we can understand the story that's happening now.
It could kind of be
maybe
like
she has to go back and like leave something to help her earlier self out, and that's
that kind of thing.
Interaction that they have,
sort of like a 2003 Sharda webcast kind of situation where that was 8 going, remember this thing that happened when I was the 4th Doctor, let's revisit that. And something like that.
And because that's for most Doctors returning, you would be excited to see them interact with the current Doctor, and that's the exciting thing for most multi-Doctor stories. But for fans, seeing McGann return, it would just be exciting to see him have his own story.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd love the idea of like, oh, next week's episode is Time of the Sontarans or whatever. And you think, okay, it's just another episode. Then you tune in, but it is just 50 minutes of Paul McGann. And there's no commentary or
That would
any
instantly
allusion.
be the best episode. Instantly be
Yeah.
the best episode of the series.
But yeah, because Nathaniel, you're in for a treat with At Childhood's End, because I've listened to the audiobook of that, and Sophie Aldred reads it and does voices for the 13th Doctor and Graham. She does great impressions. But that would actually be a good story to adapt for the screen as well. Oh, my cat Winnie agrees. Yeah, because that's also just a good, that's a loose end in the series that hasn't been tied up yet. And, you know, fans, we want to plug every gap. We want to make sure that everything is explained and elaborated on and all that stuff.
Maybe you do. Don't lump me in on that.
Get you out of the way. But yeah, I think that would be a good story to adapt. I just give Sophie Aldred just the ability to write a 50-minute story or a two-parter to adapt that to the screen. I think that story, like in that story, you don't even need to have 13 and 7 meet or cross over. They could just exist in that story, like separate from each other, because At Childhood's End has a few chapters based on 7 and her relationship, like how they parted ways. I think that'll be a good approach to take for it, even if they don't cross over.
This bit again.
The silences always start when I talk. Am I saying very terrible, bad, small brain things?
Covered everything so well. We have no.
Yeah.
You kill it every time.
Oh, God, Will's talking. Let's just stop, please.
Yeah, so that's all the prepared questions I have. We can take Q&A from the chat now. So basically how that will work is people will people will type their questions into the chat, and then I'll read them in the order that they come, and then basically anyone can respond to it. So everyone, you can leave your questions in the chat now.
Now we'll have a nice bit of awkward silence while the folks in the chat try and think about what they want to ask.
Yeah.
Has anybody in the any panelists got a question maybe for each other? That could be fun.
Great. Now the pressure's back on us. Crap.
Well, another Battles in Time card, and we can all reminisce about whatever it is.
Yeah.
Who remembers? I don't know what this is. What is this?
Oh gosh,
I don't even see it.
What?
Reptilian Arita.
Does anyone know what this is?
Oh.
To Google.
It's a 6th Doctor one, apparently.
Huh.
Which story is that?
Someone's going to be really annoyed that we didn't know what it was.
No, I
Explains
swear
why I
I
didn't
do not know.
recognize it. I have so many holes in my 6th Doctor stuff that voluntarily, because none of it's good.
So we do have some questions coming in. I apologize in advance if I pronounce people's names incorrectly. Iligeta asks, I'm assuming that should say, would you like 11 coming back?
No.
I would say no, just because it feels too recent. I mean, like, honestly, the only Doctor from modern era that I would be okay with seeing come back would be Eccleston. The rest of them, like, I mean, it's been a number of years, a while since Tennant, but kind of like Molly said, it feels like they never really got over him. And so that doesn't feel right. And then when we get to Matt Smith, I'm like, that doesn't feel like it was that long ago. Maybe to people who aren't as frigging old as I am, it feels like it was longer ago. But speaking as, I'm pretty sure the oldest person on the panel, that seems too recent to me.
I agree. I don't think it's the time for it. I'd love to see him come back. I'd love to see him do Big Finisher and stuff like that. I'd love to see him get a run there, but I don't think it's time for him to come back to the main show.
Well, he
Maybe
can
for the
come back
60th.
in the 100th anniversary special. He'll be like 82 or something.
He'll look the
It's
same.
amazing.
He will look the same. He doesn't age.
He could be the Tom Baker of the 100th anniversary.
Yeah, dude, have an equivalent of the great curator for Matt Smith.
No, I really think you might.
I wouldn't say no to any old Doctors coming back, because I think it would just be, even if the story is bad, like the two doctors, in whatever your personal opinions.
It's just good to see them again.
Absolutely is. It is just great to see Fraser Hines and Patrick Troughton. Like, Fraser Hines is just wearing his kilt and his old outfit. Like, nothing has changed, even though it's 20 years later, and I love it.
I really like the two doctors, and you can't stop me.
It was the first classic story I ever actually saw.
I can't stop you, but you're still wrong.
Yeah, Eccleston coming back would be amazing, and I'm holding out that he's in Time Lord Victorious.
Keep dreaming.
I'm holding out he's in Time Lord Victorious, and they just haven't announced it yet.
So the next question we have, I guess it's for Will, but then after Will, people can. Which is better, Wheel in Space or Revenge of the Cybermen?
So this is probably from my Twitter. I've recently watched The Wheel in Space, which is a Patrick Troughton story, and it's so boring. It's the first episode is just, oh, we're on a spaceship. Let's eat lemon sherbets and roast beef, and that's 20 minutes. That's the Wheel in Space. But Revenge of the Cybermen is cursed. It's a cursed story.
Legitimately cursed.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that though. I've actually not watched Revenge of the Cybermen for a very long time, and it's a cursed story.
I haven't seen either one of those yet, so no opinion.
I
would
like
happily
Revenge of the Cybermen. I think it's really good. I think it's underrated.
I think it's underrated. I wouldn't say it's really good though. I think it gets panned a lot, and a lot of people like to talk about how bad it is. But I think it's all right.
I just love that the BBC were like, hey, what episode should we release on VHS? And all the fans said Tomb of the Cybermen, and they went, we don't have that one. Revenge of the Cybermen.
They're basically the same.
Yeah.
But well, I've never seen Wheel in Space, but to me, I would very happily watch Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines eating lemon sherbet on a spaceship for 20 minutes. That sounds like a dream.
So that sounds fun though. But at the end of the episode, Patrick Troughton bangs his head so that he can have a holiday for part 2, and he doesn't appear in it. But Wheel in Space is the episode where they use the John Smith moniker for the first time.
I thought you were going to say he bangs his head, and that's the cliffhanger.
No, it more or less, because he's unconscious, and Jamie can't do anything, and the Doctor can't help. That is basically the cliffhanger.
I want to add to my list of things to have in Series 13, a cliffhanger that is the Doctor tripping over a brick.
Mm. Well, like the Sixth Doctor regenerated because he banged his head, so
yeah,
fell off an exercise bike.
We need more.
Realize that Patrick Troughton died in his Doctor Who costume.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was at a convention in America, and he died in the costume, which is amazing to me. It's sort of eerie and poetic at once.
I've heard conflicting rumors to that, but
I know it was at a convention because there's a video from like literally the day before, and it's kind of those weird, when you watch it, it's one of those weird things that just messes with your mind because he's so healthy and normal, and he's like, oh yeah, I can't wait to see you all tomorrow, and then that was the last thing he ever said on camera, basically. It's just one of those things that just messes with you.
Cool. So Leah Washington asks, how do you think the future of companion makeup will be? So this is kind of like, as opposed to the question we had.
I'm thinking like loads of mascara, like a bold lipstick look.
Yeah, exactly. So as opposed to like what we would write, this is asking like to predict that what we predict will happen. So we'll just be as someone else, etc.
I mean, all the indicators right now are that it's just going to be Yaz. I mean, it's within their power to spring somebody else on us. If they're going to, I would like it to be Jack.
I feel like they left, was it Gabriella from Praxeus? I feel like they left her open to possibly be one in kind of a Donna way. I feel like they kind of could justifiably bring her back. I didn't really care much for the character, but I feel like the ending was open-ended enough that she could be a Donna type that's like, oh, now I want to travel. But yeah,
I don't remember that episode well enough to be able to comment on that.
I can't picture that person.
She was wearing the Brazil shirt, I think.
She was like the young vlogger.
Yeah.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, as I said, don't really care for the character, but I feel like she was left off in a way that she could be brought back if they wanted to.
I could very much imagine them adding in just 2 random new people because they're worried that the TARDIS would feel too empty with just the 2 of them, even though I think the emptiness of the TARDIS would be a really good way to score the difference between seasons, and it would be a really good way to drive the characters forward. You know, if the characters are aware of how empty it feels without the other 2. But I think they're just going to refill it.
Or if they're going to bring in another one, they could just do it halfway through the series, kind of have half with Yaz, and then, you know, at the end of series 13, Yaz leaves, and then the new one takes over. Sort of very classic style, where the new companion just comes in halfway through, and they have a couple of adventures as a pairing, and then they switch over properly.
Yeah, that's my prediction, that Yaz is the companion for half a series and either leaves halfway through or another companion joins. Either way, I think Yaz has got half or 1 more season left in her, and then there'll be a replacement.
Obviously there's always rumours of Torchwood coming back, but they've been increased this year now that Jack's back. But I feel like Yaz could be good as a Torchwood character if she ends up joining Torchwood for their new series or whatever, because they could do a lot, kind of what they did with Martha, give her a lot more focus if she was part of Torchwood.
All those rumours are just Barrowman with like 500 sock puppet accounts.
Yeah.
Demanding the return of Torchwood. There's no credence to them.
He's been very busy during lockdown because he can't do his live shows.
It's the same with everyone is the Rani, everyone is the Master. You know, everyone will always find a way to say, "Oh, Torchwood's coming back."
Torchwood's coming back and is the Rani.
K9 and Company is coming back, and it's Yaz and K9.
Oh god.
K9 is the timeless child.
They better change the intro for K9 and Company. Like, that's a terrible intro.
Keep the music. Keep the music.
No.
Benny was the war Rani.
So Liam M asks Mark of the Ronnie ? Which I guess just means like what you guys think of that story.
I haven't actually seen it, so
I've not seen it either. So
no recollection.
I've seen Time in the Rani.
Mark of the Rani is better than Time of the Rani, and that is about all I've got.
Yeah, as far as Sixth Doctor stories go, it's fine. Like it's on the upper end, but that's not saying a lot.
I know that Colin Baker likes Mark of the Rani because he's not in his Technicolor outfit for a big deal of it. But it's also the one where he's the cliffhanger is that he's rolling down the hill on a trolley or something. And they completely cheat the edit of it for how he gets out of it. That's all I know about it.
You gotta love the Sixth Doctor cliffhangers, especially in Trial of a Time Lord, where it's just zooming on his face.
Oh, there are some good reaction gifs though.
Yeah.
You can react to basically any situation in which someone is surprised with a Colin Baker gif that zooms in on his face.
So Emma Hindle asks, can we hear, or whoever wants to do impressions of the Jadoon? And does anyone want to take that?
Joe Flo no do show mo do. Maho.
Yeah, it just ends with Maho. Iligeta again asks, who's everyone's favorite Doctor? That should be
Capaldi. Yeah.
Aldi.
The Bakers. I like them both.
It used to be Eccleston for years, and then I gradually realised in my heart it was Smith. And yeah, it was hard to come to terms with, but it's Smith.
Davison's my favourite, but Eccleston was my Doctor.
And for me, I'm always switching between Tom Baker and Paul McGann. So at any given time, it's one of those.
Paul McGann's in his own class. You know, he's so good it disqualifies him from.
Well, it's also kind of tough because if Paul McGann's going to be your favorite, that means that you are an upper echelon of Who nerd because it means you're into Big Finish.
I've not even really listened to much Big Finish. I just like saying it because he's essentially the underdog. So.
You're one of those.
Although Night of the Doctor is incredible, so. Yeah.
And Will, one of these days I need to pick your brain about the Fifth Doctor, because he's the one that I still cannot connect with. And I need to have a long conversation with somebody who really loves him to see if I can at least understand.
I understand it is a minority opinion.
I've seen comparisons between Davison and Jodie for their doctors.
So have I, and I have a hard time connecting with both of
Yeah.
them. So
I
maybe it's
can't-
me.
Negative
I personally
comparison.
can't make those connections because
right.
unless Jodie has some sort of Caves of Androzani resurrection of the Dalek style story in her last series, because I think if you picked any story from any other Doctor and compared them to any Davison story, you might come out thinking that Doctor's a better or your favorite Doctor. But for me, it's a lengthy 3-series arc about how the Fifth Doctor's miserable and is trying so hard.
To me, I only see the connection between the two of them because they're the two that I understand least as people. That's it.
I don't know what that says about me.
So Liam asks, what do you think about the racism in Talons of Weng Chiang? Does it bring it down for you, or do you excuse it? Well, I hope no one would just excuse it.
That's another one I haven't gotten to yet, but I'll tell you, I had a hard enough time swallowing the yellow face and Planet of the Spider, so I'm a little bit scared to get around to Talons of Weng Chiang.
I mean, Talons of Weng Chiang it is a difficult one. It very much shows attitudes at the time. And it obviously hasn't aged well, and it's not okay what they say. I'm not like defending the usage of it, but I don't think it brings the story down because it is a good story in general. I just say it's good what they did with the collection, where they didn't try and edit it out or anything. They just said they had a disclaimer at the start to say, this just shows attitudes at the time, something it may be uncomfortable for people.
See, I don't remember any of the racism coming out of the Doctor, but it's been a long time. If any of it comes out of the Doctor, then I feel like it will drag down the entire story for me. But if it's the people, if it's just the incidental characters that the setting, while I feel it wouldn't be, I would feel don't show it to your kids kind of a thing. I would feel it would still be realistic because it's set in history.
Yeah.
So
it's not so much that it's not so much that the characters are racist, though. More so that the story is itself inherently racist and portrays the Chinese in an incredibly negative light.
I mean, that's the kind
this is
of
the problem. I don't remember it too well. Is the thing.
that's the kind of, like I said, I haven't seen it, but I did watch the Aztecs recently, which wasn't atrocious, but you can feel the colonialist mentality in the writing. But I think that still speaks to what you just said, which is that the episode has issues, but it doesn't taint the characters because they are not specifically the voices of some of the more problematic stuff. It's just as presented, you can feel that being in there. So it can make that story hard to watch, but it doesn't now make it so you're uncomfortable watching those characters in another story.
Yeah, because I think one thing that kind of stands out more, like it's more in retrospect, like looking back years and decades later, is that you have characters in that story use racial slurs in that story in the Doctor's presence, and he just stands there as if it's just normal. It kind of like is normal for the time period, I guess you could argue, but the fact that you do have this futuristic time traveler and where probably gender and race and all these other things just don't really mean anything to him. It kind of stands out in retrospect, but it's also the fact that you get characters who are like, you get Caucasian actors who are portraying Chinese people, kind of like how in like Dalek's Master Plan you've got Kevin Stoney essentially in yellowface, even though it's a black and white story. And Talons of Weng Chiang is kind of the same. The story is still strong and holds up for the most part, but yeah, it is kind of baked into cultural norms of the time, and I don't think it was done out of malice or anything like that. Let's cancel Robert Holmes. I don't think it's anything like that. It is just something that I'm glad the collection did try and contextualize it with a disclaimer or something said of it in the booklet.
Definitely. I'm suspicious of some of the celebration of the story that still happens. I'm suspicious of people who cite it as their favorite Doctor Who story, because I think what really you're willing to excuse surely the racism would knock it down a few points, such that other stories would overtake it. I'm suspicious when people cite it as their favorite. And that, to me, says something about their ability to excuse some of the racist elements in that story.
To that, I would only say, like, at what age did that become your favorite? Because, like, as a kid, and it probably still is nostalgically, my favorite Godzilla movie is King Kong versus Godzilla. And if you've never seen that, there are Japanese people playing very dark-skinned islanders in blackface, and it ain't good. But that's also not why I like it. But dang it, it is there. So I mean, I'll give a little bit of a pass if it's a nostalgic favorite. If it's something you really came to at an age where maybe you didn't get why this was screwed up. But anyone who's watching it as an adult and going, "This is my new favorite," I'm like,
Yeah, I don't even think it's the best story in that season, let alone in Tom Baker's era. But it's
Deadly
also
Assassin is a better story that season.
I even think Hand of Evil is a better story as well. But like one thing that's kind of baked into the story is that the lead villain is using Chinese gangs to kidnap women, and the story never says or clarifies why women specifically. But you kind of know why, because it can draw up those insecurities. Like, oh, this group of people, this other is going out on the streets at night and kidnapping our women. It's that's kind of how it's framed. So there were times in the 6-part story where I was kind of squirming in my seat, but it does have merit. The story to it, the story does have merit, but it kind of makes for uncomfortable viewing.
So there's just one more question, and then we can end it there. Have you guys listened to, from Liam? Have you guys listened to Doctor in Distress?
Unfortunately, I have.
Yes.
I have not yet, but that's partially because at this point I am saving it to like film a reaction and get some content out of suffering through it. So
Wow.
that's on the to-do
But
list.
the worst bit is that the chorus actually ends up getting stuck in your head.
It really
It's
is
the worst bit.
I can hear it right now.
Yeah, so
Oh dear.
This is a fine moment to like distinguish between heard it and listened to it. I have heard it. I have not listened to it.
Got it on vinyl.
Yeah. All you have to do is put on the vinyl that Hans Zimmer was involved, because he was.
He was,
Yeah.
And you'll
played the
shift
instruments.
some copies.
Was he?
He
Yes.
was.
He
He played the
Zimmer,
synth.
yeah. Hans Zimmer, The Dark Knight, a composer, Oscar winner, I think. But yeah, that Hans Zimmer worked on Doctor in Distress.
That's really funny.
Yeah. And one day I want to meet Hans Zimmer and ask him about it, because I
He'll
don't
probably
think
just
anyone
act like he does. He probably doesn't even know what it is at this point.
Me,
That's
Hans
It's
better-
Zimmer-
better
that
than-
far out of his memory.
Better than that, you do need to get a copy on vinyl and bring that to him to sign.
Yeah.
Sign it, and just see what his face does.
But like,
Sure.
name a better glow up than Hans Zimmer doing that, and then 10 years later he does The Lion King. Like, name a better upgrade than that.
Valid.
I want to meet him now, just so I could say, "Oh, I loved your work on Doctor in Distress. Don't know about any of this other stuff, but
Yeah.
I think Hans Zimmer now has to watch out for like all 6 of us, because we're all making plans to bring this up to him.
We're going to be like the screaming girls in like the Beatles' Hard Day's Night, like, running down the street with our vinyls.
Love that.
I've got." Imagine owning Doctor in Distress on vinyl, signed by Hans Zimmer. That would be the best object to have.
Like, is this good? Is this bad?
It's the best worst thing ever.
Who knows?
All right. Well, it's kind of a weird thing to close on, but thanks everyone for coming. I hope everyone enjoyed it. All of our, if you didn't put your like social, YouTube, whatever in the chat, you can do that. I don't know if everyone did that, but yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks,
so much
guys.
for having
Thanks
us.
for having me on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for
cheers,
having me. It was
everyone.
really fun.